The day after, the International Court, which is a UN court, says that that Israel basically, there's enough evidence of genocide to continue the case, is what they said. The day after, Israel has found evidence. It just dropped on their desk. The day after, has found evidence that 12 members of the UN group, the UNRWA, the UN group that helps Palestinians, the UN office that helps Palestinians and Gazans, 12 of them were involved in the October 7th Hamas uprising and hostage taking and killing of folks, at least in the firefights, although many of those killed were by the IDF. Now, let me bring you some facts about this. So, following those accusations by Israel, the following 7 countries have suspended UNRWA funding based on Israeli claims that 12 of the agency's 30,000 employees took part in the Hamas attacks. US, Canada, UK, Finland, Australia, Italy, and Netherlands. Norway and Ireland said they would not follow suit. Switzerland has not decided yet till the accusation is clarified. Here are some facts about the UNRWA. It has 30,000 employees, 13,000 of which are in Gaza. However, fewer than 13,000 are now in Gaza because Israel has murdered many of them. Israel has murdered over 100 UN employees since October 7th. That is the most UN people to ever be murdered in any conflict ever, because Israel, unlike in most conflicts, is targeting UN workers. In Gaza, the UNRWA runs 183 schools, 22 health facilities, and 7 women's centers, among several other facilities. Its schools are attended by 286,000 students in Gaza, while its medical facilities have 3.4 million average visits per year, according to UN data. So that's what the UNRW does, and yet you have all of these countries pulling their funding because Israel suddenly stumbled upon all this evidence the day after the court refused to throw out the charges. Now, here's some interesting information from Aaron Mate. After the U.S. and allies cut off funding to the UNRWA, New York Times reporters Ronan Bergman and Patrick Kingsley launder Israel's stated pretext that a handful of employees were involved in October 7th. The New York Times conveniently omits that Israeli officials have admitted that a lot of their so-called intelligence about UNRWA is a result of interrogation of militants, aka torture. So Israel's been torturing Hamas-linked people, if that's actually true, but it very well might be. Israel's been torturing Hamas, and then what do you know? They admit to all these things that Israel wants them to admit to, such as working with the UN. To continue from Aaron, perhaps this is why we learned that Western officials have not been able to verify Israel's claims. I wonder why the U.S. hasn't been able to verify these claims that just fell on their desk the day after the court found against Israel and found that Israel is essentially committing genocide. Perhaps this is why not been able to verify Israel's claims. And even though the U.S. has yet to corroborate the Israeli claims itself, American officials say they found them credible enough to warrant suspending aid. Even if every torture-derived claim about this small group of UNRWA workers were true, nothing can justify cutting off a lifeline for millions of Palestinian refugees during a genocide. But in U.S. eyes, collective punishment against Palestinians is a credible tactic of genocide. So even the New York Times has admitted that their so-called evidence has come from torture of Hamas militants, or probably just people linked to Hamas in one way or another. And again, I think you should read nothing in to the fact that Israel stumbled across this evidence the day after the ICJ came down with the ruling. You should and successfully has gotten 7 or more countries to withdraw all funding, many of them the largest funders of such things. And here's another coincidence. Again, I want you to read nothing into this, okay? This just pure coincidence. Here is a this is a former Israeli cabinet minister, or let's see, the former Israeli official. Her name is Noga Arbel, and here she is. This is before the ICJ ruling. This is January 4th. She's saying this. So remember, this is the ICJ ruling has not happened. Israel had not made any accusations against the UNRWA yet. And here's because there's a podcast photo version of the show. I'm going to try and read this while she says it. Our main goal in the war is to eliminate the threat and not to neutralize it. And we know how to eliminate terrorists. It is more difficult for us with an idea. UNRWA is the source of the idea. They're born in all kinds. Terrorism is born in all kinds of methods. Now, you got to remember that when she says terrorism, she means all Palestinians, really. Because they call essentially anybody who's Palestinian or in Gaza, they call them terrorists, or they call them terrorist sympathizers or something. Anyway. Also, all kinds of messages. And it will be impossible to win the war if we do not destroy UNRWA. So there is public discussion among Israeli ministers, Israeli officials, about destroying this UN agency before Israel has come out with these sudden accusations that the UN was involved, that these UN workers were involved. 12 people out of the 30,000 that work for UNRWA were involved in October 7th. She says, and this destruction must begin immediately. And it's not relevant to talk about it a day after. The day is now. We must act to deal. Basically, we must murder UN workers to be able to successfully perpetrate our genocide, is honestly what I'm hearing from what she's saying. And that was, again, before the accusations by Israel claiming that 12 people from UNRWA were involved in October 7th.